How many of us have felt that sweaty pit feeling? Nervous and anger whenever someone says, I have critique for you or feedback, or they lash out with some criticism. Today we're talking about criticism and how to receive it in a good and positive way. You might be surprised with some of the tactics and hacks that we have found that work for us whenever we're receiving criticism. So stick around. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back to the Nice Veins Bro podcast, the #1 personal development podcast for healthcare and wellness professionals. I am NENEPABLO, host of this podcast, registered nurse, and creator of Nice Veins Bro. And I am joined again by my beautiful wife, Lexa.
Hello again. Welcome. Wait, what?
Welcome.
I'm welcoming myself and all of our guests joining us.
That's fantastic. Listening. That is great. Today we're talking about criticism. Have you ever been criticized, Lex?
Yes.
Tell me about it. How do you receive criticism?
My first response to criticism is always oh yeah, it's probably my fault. Like immediately I take on the guilt and shame of doing something wrong. Multiple instances have happened where I've had a meeting with the manager and it's like for an evaluation or something quarterly. And they're like, so how would you rate yourself? And I'm like, suboptimal. Almost always I think I'm like performing under the bar, and they're like, no, you're fine.
I wonder if it's
like
fear.
Consistently meets expectations is what they usually rate me, and I'm like, oh, I thought I was doing badly.
Is it a fear of authority or something?
Yeah, I think part of how I was raised was to be respectful in your responses, and so if somebody found fault in you and they were older and in a position of power, then it was because you were doing something wrong, you know?
When we talk about the team in general, if you create an atmosphere or a culture on your unit or on your team, wherever you work, where feedback is just like a norm, it's like no one's attacking anybody. That culture is so much better because it's understood on the unit or at the job workplace that we are striving for excellence. Yeah. So if I'm like saying, hey, I have some feedback for you, you don't take it personally.
Yeah.
And it just elevates the entire workplace excellence.
Yeah.
And in the end, it also helps patient safety, right?
For sure. Yeah. When it comes to like a bedside situation or like a unit manager who encourages this feedback loop or always, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing that happened, just always having some feedback.
What's a terrible way to receive criticism? Being defensive almost validates their concern for what you're doing wrong.
Well, yeah, because then it's awkward and you're like, why are you so triggered by it? Like, why do you have to get so upset about it?
Yeah, actually, so I heard someone say that defensiveness validates accusations. So it's not necessarily, we may look at it as an accusation, but it's not always just an accusation of something. But as soon as someone gets defensive, it almost makes it look like, wow, so it must be right, or the accusation or whatever it is that they're saying about you, whether it's in good intention or because they're just trying to hurt you, it must be right. If you get defensive, the accusation is correct.
Or you're guilty of something.
You are guilty of something. Yeah. So strategies for receiving criticism effectively.
So #1, we have to realize that criticism almost always hurt a little bit. And we need to figure out how to move past the initial emotional reaction.
Emotional damage.
Emotional
damage. Emotional, I remember that. So.
Like for someone like me, being somebody who's like, I guess, sensitive, like I have to realize, okay, I can acknowledge the feelings I have of guilt, shame, or whatever it is, just like stress and embarrassment. And then like acknowledge that, try and look at that and see if that's well-founded. Like if the feeling of shame is because I actually did something wrong. And then if I didn't do anything wrong, take a look at what I was told and analyze if that's true or not, so that I can process that information. And if it's true, then I can apply that to improving what I'm doing.
It's all right if it's hurtful at first. Don't get bent out of shape because you have this gut reaction, because for humans in general, receiving something, like a feedback or something or a criticism is not always going to be nice and happy.
Yeah. Well, and also Sometimes when people give us feedback, it's not necessarily that they're criticizing us, but they're having a reaction to us, or maybe it's their own. They're having some kind of issue by themselves.
You're saying that
they're taking it on you.
Oftentimes, criticism is not necessarily about you. Instead, it's when you look at it and say, "Oh, this is actually telling me a lot about the person who is criticizing."
Right. Yeah.
So stepping away from the emotional and being like, "Ooh, that hurt," but you like step away from it and realize that, they're probably telling you more about them than they really are telling about you. Once you say, "Oh, that hurt, but I'm going to move past that." Number 2 would be to thank them for the feedback. And that's really hard to do. But I think the first thing you got to do is right after you just say, "Thank you for the feedback." And say feedback rather than criticism. Because, when you say feedback, it's really just information that they're giving you. Criticism can often be looked at in kind of a negative, like, "Ooh, I don't like that word, criticize."
Yeah.
But you say negative. Feedback, it's really information that they're giving you, and you want to thank them for it regardless. You thank them for it. It diffuses the situation. It makes you psychologically think, "Oh, this is something good that I can receive."
Thirdly, we can try to dig deeper and try to understand why they're saying that, what's their view on that, and how I can apply what they're saying. We can take on that personal responsibility to look at ourselves and then look at them and then evaluate what they have said.
So understanding them and also understanding that you don't necessarily have to agree with them.
Yeah, like you said earlier.
You don't need to feel the pressure of, they're giving you factual information.
Yeah.
Like someone can say, "Oh, you're doing that bad." And you're like, "Well, thank you for the feedback."
I know. It's so much easier to
disagree with you, but you're wrong, but thank you for the feedback. Yeah. So number 4 would be determine what is and what isn't useful, which I love this one because number 4 says, I know what I believe, my core values about whatever it is that I'm doing. It can be the smallest thing, maybe the method of which you do something. If you have a certain reason why you do things, if someone's feedback helps you in some areas, that's fantastic. So you take their information and you piece it together and you say, "Is this going to help my practice? I'm going to throw out what's crap and I'm going to keep what's good." And that's fantastic. You are in control of, at that point, with the information that they bring. So decide what's useful from what their feedback is and throw away what is not. There was one experience, I was working with a tech. We were putting the leads on the patient. And so we're putting the leads and all this stuff, and I'm doing it correctly. Okay, mind you, I'm putting the first one correctly. And out of nowhere, the tech is like, "This is how I remember it. The snow over the grass, the smoke over the fire, and the brown and she goes and she like repeats it several times, like, trying to help me. And it's in front of the patient. It was just kind of embarrassing, that the tech is here teaching me and all that stuff. And I wanted so bad to say, I know how to put leads on my patient. I'm a nurse. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a little bit embarrassing, but I chose to bite my tongue. And I should have probably addressed it later, how much it bothered me, but I didn't. I just kind of let it roll off my shoulder. But those are the moments where you really have to bite your tongue.
Yeah.
That's not a moment to lash out and
sure.
I don't appreciate that feedback or whatever. And
Definitely
maybe she was just trying to be helpful or whatever.
Right.
But again, I'm gonna take in what is useful and I'm gonna throw away what's not. And guess what? All of what she said I threw out because it was not useful.
Number 5, give yourself some time to practice implementing that criticism you received. What you deemed was useful, give yourself some time to apply that and actually make changes relevant to your practice, because it's not going to change overnight. If you're going to learn to do something differently, if you're going to change something that someone else has criticized, you may not get it right every time, or you may not change it every single time.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there was this skin care change on my unit where we had a certain kind of like skin protectant we needed to use, and it was rolled out like hospital wide, and it took forever for me to think about using it. to protect my patient's skin if they were like, having frequent incontinence. It just wasn't part of my existing practice.
You would still kind of revert back to the previous method or that you were using or whatever.
But something else to protect the skin. But then I started seeing other people doing it more often, and especially like the person in charge of that change.
The skin team,
doing it and suggesting it over and over again. And so I was like, okay. So then I started using it. And now, I thought about it just the other week. I used it to apply to my patient's skin and like protect them from future incontinence. And, it's like, it feels good to be able to realize, hey, I actually made a change.
But change takes time.
Yeah.
And that's really
the whole point, is like having patience, that you will be able to apply that critique. You will improve. And just have patience for yourself.
And you can express that to the person who's giving you critique. Maybe it's maybe it's a supervisor, maybe it's a manager, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But whoever's overseeing, or maybe it's a coworker as well. If they see you making the same kind of like not implementing that thing that they suggested or the feedback, it's good like at the beginning to say, okay, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try. Give me some time to try to implement this thing that you've given me. And that puts a lot, they look at you with more respect at that point because you're asking for time. That means that you're taking it seriously. You're going to give yourself time to practice and make sure it's part of your new practice, right? Your new approach to care. But that's where it leads to number 7, because number 7 is follow up with the person who gave you critique. And that sounds so annoying to some people. Why would I follow up with this person who gave me feedback or critique or whatever? Especially if they gave it to me in almost kind of like a mean way or a hurtful way. But when you do it like that, where you go back to them and you say, hey, I really appreciate when you gave me this because I saw this and that and the other, or it improved my practice or improved whatever I did, my communication skills, whatever it might be that they gave you feedback on. If you see that there's improvement, go back and follow up with them, because they will really have a new and fresh respect for you.
Oh, that's true.
For having listened to what they said. And then in the future, if they have things to either tell you, they'll be careful with what they say, almost, in a way, because they know that you will take it seriously and you will take their words with weight. And that's an amazing thing. So it helps create good bonds and strong bonds at work as well. The main benefit with taking this approach when someone gives you feedback and stuff is really about checking your humility and being open to be corrected. There's scripture in the Bible in Proverbs that talks about how the fool doesn't want to be corrected, or the fool hates correction, right? But the wise is all about having that accountability. That's what the wise person does.
Yeah.
And in Proverbs specifically, chapter 11, verse 2, it says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with the humble, there is wisdom. And so this is a great way to check your humility. If someone says, hey, you're doing this, and I think it should be this way or whatever, it's a strike on our pride oftentimes whenever we get uncomfortable about it. I'm not talking about the people who are very ugly. That's on them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The people who come and criticize, we've had some mean comments, right? And that's not even criticism. At that point, that's just haters, right? We're not talking about haters. We're talking about people who actually have constructive criticism, something that you have to say, this is useful information.
Right, helpful information.
Yeah, it's a check on your own pride, on your humility. And so it's a good way to have that self-evaluation. So I hope that will help your practice, and I hope that oftentimes some of the topics that we talk about on these podcasts, they kind of step on our toes a little bit. When I talk about pride, when I talk about taking personal responsibility, all these things, it kind of calls us to look at ourselves and try to refine our characters and so on and so forth. And so, it's all about that. It's about making sure that we are humble, and that's where we have the opportunity to grow. So I hope that you enjoy this podcast. Thank you for listening. And if you will, please share it with someone. Share it with someone. Put it on your social media. If you're on YouTube, comment below. about an experience where someone gave you feedback and you got really upset, or maybe a positive experience that you had giving feedback or something like that. So would love to hear from you. If you're listening on a podcast platform that's audio only, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, put a 5-star review. That'll really, really help us out. But thank you again for listening. Remember to be a positive force and influence within healthcare and society. Que Dios me lo bendiga.
Anybody watching? Okay, rewind. So I had a...
No, mamita. I want you to start like that.
I was just like...
God, wellness, and purpose.
All of our eating noises are on...
What did you say?
I'm so sleepy. Oh my word.
Good night, friends. When I would listen to podcasts before I became a podcaster myself, I didn't realize how much leaving a 5-star review helped. And so now on this side, I just want you to know that it really does mean a whole lot when people review and share the content. So if you enjoyed it, please share it with somebody and leave a 5-star review on whichever platform you use, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And if you're interested, you can also find us on social media at Nice Veins Bro, or shop online at niceveinsbro.com. My personal stuff you can find under NENEPABLO, which is spelled NENEPABLO. I spend most of my time on YouTube making vlogs and videos, and on Instagram. So I would love to connect with you. And remember, be a positive force and influence within healthcare and society. It's all about God, wellness, and purpose here. Thank you for listening.